So what I'd like to do is just get to the Pashut Pshat of Eruv Tavshillen. And as you'll discover, that's not so Pashut. It's not so simple because there's a lot of complexity behind this institution that we call an Eruv Tavshillen. And I thought it was appropriate to discuss because we're doing it 3 times over the course of this Yom Tov season. We did it before Rosh Hashanah, and we're going to do it before the first days of Sukkot, and then we'll do it before Shmini Atzeres as well. So before we look at this chart will become much more self-explanatory once we run through some of the sources. The primary source of Eruv Tavshillen, which is a rabbinic institution, a rabbinic invention, is from the Mishnah in Maseches Beitza. It says as follows: Daf Tesvav Amud Beis in the Gemara says, the Mishnah says, Yom Tov shechalios erev Shabbos lo yivashel batchila miyom tov l'Shabbos. When Yom Tov falls out on a Friday, a person may not begin his cooking on Yom Tov for the sake of Shabbos. Aval mevashel hu liyom tov v'im hosir l'Shabbos. What he is allowed to do is just to do regular cooking for Yom Tov, and he can cook in abundance as much as he wants for Yom Tov. And if he has any leftovers, he can use the leftovers for Shabbos. And as the Gemara says, Uvalvad shelo ya'arim, Rashi makes a point of saying that you can't play tricks. In other words, if you have a family of 5, you should make enough food to feed 5 people the necessary meals for Yom Tov. And whatever you have left over, you can be generous in the amount of but you can't be like so generous that it's patently obvious that you mean for the food to be for Shabbos as well. Now here is the remedy of Eruv Tavshillen. What you can do is you can use a cooked food, cook it on Erev Shabbos, and rely upon that to allow you to continue the cooking process on Yom Tov to go into Shabbos. Now, the mechanism or the process whereby Eruv Tavshillen works is that the rabbi said that as long as you don't begin cooking on Yom Tov for Shabbos, you're okay. If you begin cooking on Shabbos before Yom Tov starts, just begin. It could be a very small beginning, and then you continue that process on Yom Tov, that's okay. And that's the whole mechanism of Eruv Tavshillen. You start the beginning process of cooking and baking by taking your egg and matzah, and you're saying, this is the beginning of the cooking and baking preparations that I'm doing for Shabbos, so that whatever I do on Yom Tov will be a continuation of this beginning. And that's the whole way you remedy the situation. So it's completely usher to start on Yom Tov, but if I start before Yom Tov, I can continue on Yom Tov with impunity. And that's the whole way that an Eruv Tavshillen works. Now, it would seem, therefore, that it's only proper that if you're going to say that the egg and the matzah are for the beginning of the preparation for Shabbos, you should, lechatchila, as the poskim say, you should consume at least a portion of the Eruv Tavshillen on Shabbos to demonstrate that this taco was not just a game that I was playing. So many people are makbid to eat the Eruv Tavshillen either at Shalosh Shudas or at some other point at the point of Shabbos. If you don't mind, let me just suspend questions until we just get the very, very basics, and then we'll come back to just write it down, and hopefully your question will be answered along the way. Okay, now still a lot of questions looming out there. We're going to skip the rest of it, and we'll take a look at the Gemara. Second paragraph of source number 1, Minohani Mili. Where do we get this idea from? Says the Gemara, Omar Shmuel da Omar Kra, Zachoris Yom HaShabbos L'Kadasho, Zachrehu Me'achar Shabola Hashkicho. It's based on a pasuk. This is not saying that it's midioraisa, it's not smachta. It's something that it's a reminder that we can trace to in the pasuk for this rabbinic institution. The Torah says, remember the Shabbos to make it holy, which indicates to us that we have to do something to remember the Shabbos because otherwise you may forget it. Now, what does that mean? What does it mean? So it's a machlokes, my taima. Like what is being meant by like lama tiknu eruv? Kravadai layav be'eruv mishtoi. Rashi says the pasuk's not talking about an eruv tavshilin, but what did the rabbis What did they see in that pasuk to make them institute an Eruv Tavshillen? So Amar Rava Kedei Sheyivra Mana Yafa L'Shabbos Umana Yafa L'Yom Tov. The answer is to set aside a goodly portion on Shabbos and a goodly portion on Yom Tov. Now, what does it mean? He says you want to make sure that you're going to have something good for Shabbos. That's the way that Rava understands it, the way Rashi explains it. Rava says, if we allow you to start preparing for Shabbos on Yom Tov, you may forget Shabbos because of all of your Yom Tov festivities. And as a result, it's going to be Friday afternoon. You've been singing and dancing and having a grand old time on Yom Tov. And now you realize, oh my goodness, I forgot to prepare for Shabbos. So this is going to cause Shabbos to be forsaken in some way. And so the rabbi said, to make sure that you don't forsake Shabbos, start the process a little bit before, and that way you'll properly honor Shabbos on Shabbos. It'll remind you to continue, make sure you got enough food for Shabbos on Yom Tov. So remember, Rava says it's for Kavod Shabbos. Rav Ashi Omar, Kidei sheyomru ein ofen miyom tov l'Shabbos kal v'chomer miyom tov l'chol. So Rav Ashi says, I have a different explanation. It is not because of the concern of Shabbos, but rather it is out of a concern for the Yom Tov. He says, if we tell you that you can do all of your Shabbos preparations on Yom Tov, people will look at Yom Tov as a day that I can do all the stuff that I need to do for Shabbos, and they'll forget about Kavod Yom Tov. Yom Tov will just become the day that I have to do all of my Shabbos preparations. When are you going to sing? When are you going to dance? When are you going to have a grand old time? So therefore, begin the process before Yom Tov. That'll leave over some time for you to celebrate Yom Tov appropriately, and will also give you time to prepare for Shabbos as well. The essential machlokus between Rava and Rav Ashi was the institution of Eruv Tavshillen to properly remember or honor Shabbos, or was it to properly remember and honor Yom Tov? That's the machlokus between the two of them. Now, this is going to turn out to be a tangential issue to the main issue of how the mechanism of Eruv Tavshillen works, but as you'll see, it does play a role into fitting pieces into a puzzle. Okay? Let's go on, because I want to just run through the sources as quickly as possible. Okay. The Rambam in Hilchos Yom Tov, source number 2, in paskening this halacha, states as follows: Yom Tov shechalios erev Shabbos ein ofen umuvashlim b'Yom Tov mashu ochel lamachar b'Shabbos. When Yom Tov falls out on Friday, you're not allowed to utilize Yom Tov as a day for cooking and baking for Shabbos. The Isser zeh midivrei sofrim. This prohibition is rabbinic in nature. Now, those are crucial words that should be underlined there. That's why I underlined it. Kedei shelo yavo levashel miyom tov l'chol. And the reason why the rabbis made this rule, that you may not use Yom Tov as a day of cooking for Shabbos, is because you'll further deprecate Yom Tov and use it as a day of preparing for a weekday. When Yom Tov is not on Friday, you'll use it. You say, okay, so maybe there's no lack of kavod on Yom Tov to cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos, because of course I'm preparing for something else that's holy. But you're going to come to prepare on Yom Tov for a regular day, and that's even worse. You're using Yom Tov as a day to prepare for the mundane. Shekal v'chomer hu l'Shabbos, einu mavashel kol shekein l'chol. Therefore, lefichach, im asa tavshil me'erev Yom Tov sheyas samech alav u'mavashel vof b'Yom Tov l'Shabbos harei ze muter. And therefore, says the Rambam, if you started the process by cooking or baking before you made something called an Eruv Tavshillen, you can continue the process on Yom Tov for Shabbos. B'tavshil zeh shesamech alav hu nikra Eruv Tavshillen. This is what the rabbis called an Eruv Tavshillen. Now, before we look at halacha number 2, we're going to go into a few different directions. But the Rambam, just to encapsulate, we'll speak it out outside. Machlokus between the Rambam and the Ravid as to why it's called an Eruv Tavshillen. What does the word Eruv mean? To mix or to incorporate. Yeah? The Rambam says that the whole reason why it's called an Eruv Tavshillen is the word mixture has nothing to do with what you're doing when you make an Eruv Tavshillen. But rather it's of the same genre of mechanism like an Eruv Tchumen or an Eruv Chatzeros. Because what does it essentially do? It allows you to do something that you normally wouldn't be allowed to do. An Eruv Chatzeros allows you to carry, an Eruv Tchumen allows you to walk beyond the Tchum. So therefore, an Eruv Tavshillen allows you to cook when you normally wouldn't be allowed to cook. So therefore, the rabbis, you borrowed the term Eruv, even though it really has nothing to do with the process that's taking place when you make an Eruv Tavshillen, because you're not incorporating anything like you do with an Eruv Tchumen, where you incorporate all the neighbors together, or an Eruv Chatzeros, when you incorporate all the neighbors together, or an Eruv Tchumen, when you incorporate something that's beyond the Tchum with something that's in the Tchum. The Ravid is very unhappy. He says, Hatam hazel lina'arim. He says, this reason is for the Utes. He says, this is not a valid reason. This is a very shallow explanation. That's not a wise explanation. Ki hu omer ki hu shol meruvi chatzeros klomer zeh mishum heker hu v'zeh mishum heker hu. Ma zeh shmo eruv avzeh shmo eruv. Ve'ein okay. The Ravid says, like, what are you saying? Just like this is a reminder that you can do something that you normally can't do, so too this is a reminder? That doesn't make any sense. Ela shehu ma'arev tzorchei Shabbat al tzorchei Yom Tov la'asotam yachad. The Ravid says there really is an Eruv, an incorporation of activity. You're incorporating your Yom Tov cooking with your Shabbos cooking. And that's why it's called an Eruv Chatzeros, is that you're demonstrating, by starting the cooking process before Yom Tov, that whatever you're cooking on Yom Tov is both for Shabbos and Yom Tov. And that's why it's called an Eruv. We're going to skip the Hagos Maimoni for just a minute, but bear in mind that the Rambam was very clear when he said that the prohibition of cooking and baking on Yom Tov for Shabbos is only midurabanan. Are we clear on that? The prohibition of cooking and baking on Yom Tov for Shabbos is only an Isser Derabanan, which is alleviated by the Eruv Tavshillen. That's very important that we get that. Now, why am I making a point of saying that? Is it possible that there would be an Isser Deoraisa of cooking and baking on Yom Tov for Shabbos? Is that even a possibility?
You couldn't do it with an Eruv.
That wouldn't be possible, because how could possibly the Chachamim undo an Isser Deoraisa by creating this mechanism, this flimsy mechanism? So the Rambam seems to be patently obvious. So why is Korobkin harping on this? Let's take a look. So the Gemara now says, the Gemara in Pesachim, source number 4. Itmar, ha'ofe miyom tov l'chol. If a person bakes on Yom Tov, and he does it for the sake of a weekday, Rav Chisda Omar loike, and Rabba Omar eno loke. Rav Chisda says you've done an Isser Deoraisa if you cook. Now, cooking on Yom Tov is based on the principle that the Torah says that you're allowed to ach asher ye'ochel l'chol nefesh hu levado ye'aseh lochem. That's the fundamental difference between Shabbos and Yom Tov, in that on Yom Tov you're allowed to do meleches ochel nefesh, but you're only allowed to cook for Yom Tov. You're not allowed to cook on Yom Tov for a weekday. So Rav Chisda makes a lot of sense. He says if you do so, you violated Yom Tov and you get malchus. Rabbah says, no, you don't get malchus. Rav Chisda Omar Loke, lo amrinan holo mikloy le'orchim chazile. Why is it that you get malchus? Because you violated Yom Tov. You did a malacha on Yom Tov that was not for meleches ochel nefesh. Rabbah says you don't get malchus. And why does Rabbah say you don't get malchus? So here we're introduced to a principle called hol v'imikloi orchim, which means that it's theoretically possible for guests to come and for me to feed them, which means it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Yom Tov. Yom Tov is on a Tuesday, let's say. And I really, when I'm making these, I'm baking a loaf of bread, and I have in mind that I'm baking it to eat tomorrow. I want to send it off with my kids when they put it in their lunchbox when they take it to school tomorrow morning. Okay? So I'm clearly having in mind that I'm baking this bread for chol, for a weekday. But Rabbah says you haven't done an Isser Deoraisa because theoretically, a guest could come unexpected, knock on the door, and you would need something to feed them. Lo and behold, it turns out that this bread was for Yontif after all. So since in theory the bread could be for Yontif, you haven't violated the Isser Deoraisa. You haven't violated the Isser Deoraisa by baking a loaf of bread on Yontif regardless of your intentions. Okay? So
according to Rabbi, it's still an Isser Rabbanan.
But according to
Rabbi, it's still an Isser
according to Rabbi, it would still be an Isser. Because you're not allowed to lechatchila bake with the intention of using it for chol, but you're obviating only the Yisr Deoraisa. Correct, Manny. So, continue the Gemara. Amar le Rabba le Rav Chisda l'didach the amart lo amrinan hoel eich ofen miyom tov l'Shabbos. He says, now wait a minute. According to you, that you don't hold of this thing called hoel. Hoel is not a thing according to you. And therefore, if you're cooking on Yontif for anything other than Yontif, how come we're allowed to bake on Yom Tov for Shabbos when Yom Tov falls out on Friday? So Amar le mishum Eruv Tavshillen. So he said to him, well, it's because of Eruv Tavshillen. Everyone knows that. We just got through that, right? Because you made an Eruv Tavshillen. So the Gemara asks the obvious question. Well, mishum Eruv Tavshillen sharmina nisura deoraisa. Wait a minute. If you don't say hoil, and you're baking on Yontif for Shabbos, you're doing a malacha deoraisa on Yontif. So how can an Eruv Tavshillen alleviate an Isser deoraisa? That's the Gemara's question. Answers the Gemara. Amar lei mideoraisa tzorchei Shabbos nasin biyom tov v'rabbanan hu degazru bei gezerah shemayomru ofen biyom tov af l'chol v'keven da'atzruchu rabbanan Eruv Tavshillen islei hekera. So the answer that Rav Chisda gave back to Rabbah is like this. You have to differentiate. There's only an Isser Deoraisa of baking on Yontif for Chol. Baking on Yontif for Shabbos is only an Isser Derabbanan. It's only an Isser Derabbanan. And so therefore, the Rabbanan made it. And why did the Rabbanan forbid? You see, baking on Yontif for another holy day, not so bad. Torah doesn't prohibit that. But the Rabbanan said, no, we're not going to allow it, because if we allow you to bake on Yontif for Shabbos, you may come to bake on Yontif for Chol. But if you make an Eruv Tavshillen, that'll remind you that today is different, and therefore everything is copacetic.
Only for Shabbos.
But only for Shabbos. An Eruv Tavshillen only works to cook on Yontif for Shabbos, but doesn't help you to cook on Yontif for Chol. Fine. Now we've got that part of the puzzle. So if you go back, we've got the first two machlokos covered in our chart. The reason for Eruv Tavshillen, Rava says for Kavod Shabbos, because you want to make sure that you're going to have properly prepared food for Shabbos, and the Eruv Tavshillen will remind you. And Rav Ashi says it's for Kavod Yom Tov, that you want to make sure that Yom Tov is not used in a deprecating fashion.
What about the guests, though?
Wait a minute. The principle of Hoel is number 2. Hoel v'ikla yorchim. We just were introduced to that concept now. According to Rav Chisda, it's not a thing. Doesn't exist. There's no such svara that if something is asr min deoraisa, the principle of Hoel can alleviate. Therefore, according to Rav Chisda, if you cook on Yom Tov for Chol, you're going to get malchus regardless of whether guests could theoretically come or not. But according to Rabbah, it's a thing. Which means that even though I agree with you that it's an Isser to cook on Yom Tov for Chol, but it's not an Isser Deoraisa because of the principle of Hoel. Who's with me so far? Is it simple? Is it easy so far? Okay, fasten your seatbelts. Let's go on. Okay, number 5. Omar Rabbah. This is the first blot of Maseches Beya. Omar Rabbah. The Gemara is debating as to why Nolda Bazeh, right, when an egg is laid on Yontif, Beitza Shenolda B'Yom Tov is Muktzah, it's Nolad. So why is that? When an egg is laid on Yontif, why is it Asr? You're probably familiar with that Mishnah. Most of us have learned that Mishnah at some time in our Jewish education. So Rabba's reason for saying that the egg is usher, the egg is not permitted, is Mai dichsiv v'haya bayom hashishi v'heichinu eis asher yaviu chol meichin l'Shabbos v'chol meichin l'Yom Tov v'ein Yom Tov meichin l'Shabbos v'ein Shabbos mechina l'Yom Tov. Principle, based on the pasuk in the Torah, that when you want to prepare something for Shabbos or for Yom Tov, it has to be prepared on a weekday. If food was not prepared properly on a weekday, but it was rather prepared on a Shabbos or a Yom Tov, then the halacha is that that food is prohibited. And therefore it would follow that you're doing a prohibited act by doing that act of preparation. According to Rabbah, therefore, preparing something on Yom Tov for Shabbos is an Isser De'oraisa. Isser De'oraisa. Preparing something on Yom Tov for Shabbos is an Isser De'oraisa. Everyone with me now? How does that stem with the Rambam?
Who said that includes cooking, though?
Well, we don't know. It would seem preparing would mean preparing. Let's see. But if you look back at the Rambam, and the Rambam that we just saw in Hilchas Yom Tov Perek Vav seems to be saying that the prohibition of cooking and baking on Yom Tov for Shabbos is an Isser D'Rabbanan. Okay, so how do you reconcile it? Not a big deal. If you remember the first blot of Maseches Beitza, you know that Rabbah is only one opinion of several opinions as to why an egg that's laid on Yom Tov is Asr. Rabbah says it's got to do with the problem of Hachana. The egg was not properly prepared from before Yom Tov. But there are other opinions. Gezerah this, Gezerah that, Gezerah Shama Yala V'Yitlosh, Gezerah Shama Yischot. There's so many other reasons why the rabbis say that it's Asr. So the Rambam simply doesn't hold of Rabbah in the Gemara in Beitza. That would be the simple explanation. So far, so good. This is really Tosfos' issue. Tosfos really has a quandary. If you take a look at Tosfos on that Gemara in Maseches Bey, he says, Ach tema, hoel v'hachana de'oraisa, heich ofen umevashlim miyom tov l'Shabbos. How can we possibly cook on Yom Tov using an Eruv Tavshillen for the sake of Shabbos if there's an Isser of Hachana that's Asr Midioraisa? V'chitem aydei Eruv Tavshillen. Maybe no problem, the Eruv Tavshillen. V'chi asi takanta derabanan v'li'aker Hachana Deoraisa. How can a rabbinic institution override a Torah prohibition? That doesn't work. Okay, so v'nira liyashev. So it would seem to me, the Rabba Gufe Ozel Latame de Islay Hoel V'imikloi Orchim Chazilei Hashanami Chazilei. Answers Tosas very simple. No problem. Remember Rabba in Psachim, what did Rabba say? I hold that Hoel is a thing. So, remember, you got to connect the dots in your head. Hoel is the principle that says that even though the Torah only allows you to do Meleches Ochel Nefesh for Yontif itself, and therefore if you're cooking on Yontif that's not for Yontif, you're not doing what the Torah allows, it's still not an Isser D'Oraisa to cook on Yontif for Chol. Why? Because of Hoel. So Rabbah says, turns out like this, according to Rabbah, the reason why an Eruv Tavshillen works is only because of Hoel. If you don't hold of Hoel, then an Eruv Tavshillen ain't going to work. How would Rav Chisda explain it? Rav Chisda will tell you, no, an Eruv Tavshillen works differently because according to Rav Chisda, what? There is no Isser D'Oraisa of preparing from Yom Tov l'Shabbos. It's only an Isser from Yom Tov to Chol, like the Gemara in Psachim had said. You all with me?
You don't need Hoel.
You don't need Hoel. You don't need Hoel. So far, so good? Okay, if I was to ask you at this point, who is the Rambam paskening like now? Between Rabbah and Rav Chisda? It would seem like he's going like Rav Chisda, right? Seems that way. The Rambam says like Rabbah somewhere else. We'll get to that in a minute. Okay, next.
Which number was Rav Chisda's?
Rav Chisda was the Gemara in number 4, the Gemara in Psachim Daf Mem Vav Amud Beis.
You said though you can't eat the egg on Yom Tov because of Hachana, according to Rabbah.
Oh, okay. So we're not going to get into the details of the egg right now, because the Gemara is more elaborate over there in Beitza. I don't want to confuse the issue, so just take my word for it for now. But ayin sham, it's very simple. Take a look at the few lines in the Gemara over there, you'll see. Okay.
Why do we assume that? I mean, he could hold like, he learns like Rav Ashi, he's actually specifying the reason is because of Rav Ashi, and he's not getting into the focus because he hoped that it's going to be a Durabanan without Ho'ayim.
Okay, let's go back. What does Rav Ashi say?
The Rambam clearly.
Yeah. He holds like Rav Ashi for sure.
He holds like Rav Ashi that it's because of Kavod Yom Tov.
Correct. He doesn't get into the discussion of Ho'ayim. He assumes that there's no Isser D'Oraisa.
Okay. Now, if you hold like Rav Ashi, it would seem like you're not holding like Rabbah also. In other words, think about it for a second. If Rav Ashi says that the whole reason why you're not allowed to cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos is because it's not Kavod Yom Tov, what about the Yisur of Hachana? Rav Ashi doesn't have a problem with that. Must be, he doesn't hold like Rabbah also. So I'm saying you're right. I agree with you. But then the Rambam's paskening like Rav Ashi, who holds not like Rabbah, who holds that there's no Isser Hachana. There's no Chisaron of Hachana. You know what I'm saying? Good. Two more Tosfos excerpts that I think are necessary. Tosfos Maseches Psachim Daf Mem Vav Amud Beis. Rabba Omar Eino Loka. Rabba says you don't get Malkus, as we learned before, if you cook on Yom Tov for Chol, because of the principle of Ho'il. The Im Tomar Da Omar Bahamatzniya. There's a Gemara in Shabbos that says that Hamechabed Vaharoda Chalot Devash Shagag B'Shabbos Chayiv Chatas Hazed B'Yom Tov Sofek Esar Barm Divi Rebbe Eliezer. According to Rebbe Eliezer, if a person were to do a malacha, such as sweeping the floor, which is a malacha of bone, or pulling out honeycombs out of a beehive, which is tolesh. These are malachas on Shabbos and Yom Tov. If he was to do this on Yom Tov, he would get malchus for it according to Rebbe Eliezer. V'chachamim omrim ein kan ela shavus va'amai loke l'Rebbe Eliezer. And the chachamim say, no, it's only nisur d'Rabbanan. We're not going to get into the chacham shita, but Tosfos says, why in the world would Rebbe Eliezer say that you get malchus for it? Just apply the principle of Ho'il. Le mahol mikloy le orchim. Just say, wait a minute, I'm doing this meleches ochel nefesh. I'm doing this for the sake of my guests. I'm pulling out the honeycombs. I know I'm doing it because I want honey tomorrow, but Ho'il, apply Ho'il, and say that I'm doing it for my guests, and you're allowed to pull out honeycombs for the guests if it's for the sake of Yom Tov. So say Ho'il, and you should never get malchus for it. And even the Rabbanan only say that you don't get malchus because they don't consider it a malacha. But if they considered it a malacha, you would get malchus. Why should that be? According to Rabbah, always apply the principle of Ho'il. Answers Tosfos. There's a blank space here because Tosfos gives another answer first, but we're going to go to the second answer. The Yeshlomar inami beroda samach lishkia sachama shafilu yavo orchim ein shahus b'yom la'ochlo. Listen to this answer. This is very, very important. This is crucial. Tosfos says that the principle of Ho'il is limited to time. What does the principle of Ho'il say? What do the words mean? Guests may come, and therefore, even though I mentally prepared this, cooked this for Chol, it's theoretically edible for guests. But what if there's no time for guests to come and have a meal? 5 minutes before Shkia, before Lich benching, and I start cooking. Can you say now the principle of Ho'il? No.
It's basically haram.
And it's not only haram, it's an Isser D'Oraisa now. In other words, the Ho'il no longer exists even according to Rabbah. So if I cook 5 minutes before the end of Yom Tov, and I'm cooking for Chol, even Rabbah would agree that I would get malchus if I do it b'mezid. Because Ho'il doesn't work. And when it's at the very end and there's no time for guests to come. So, Tosfos says, Uvahashinua ya asi shapir mashehiksha riva de shamina leila rabba de islay hachana beresh maseches beitza. Now we can answer a very simple question that the Riva, one of the Tosafists, asks. We know that Rabbah holds of the principle that there's an Isser D'Oraisa that if you don't prepare on Chol for Shabbos or for Yom Tov. Uvereish b'chol ma'arvin damer ein Yom Tov meichin l'Shabbos. And we also know that he says that Yom Tov cannot be used as a day for preparing for Shabbos. Now, I amart hoil hecha mishkachas la de'in yom tov mechin l'Shabbos. And if you're going to say that there's a principle of hoil that Rabbah holds like, so how can it be that preparing on Yom Tov for Shabbos is an Isser Deoraisa? The answer is, theoretically, it could be when there's no time for guests to come. Now, it's almost the converse of what we saw from Tosfos before. Tosfos in Maseches Beitza asked the question backwards. He said, how could it be that according to Rabbah, who holds that the Isser of cooking on or preparing on Yom Tov for Shabbos is Deoraisa, how does an Eruv Tavshillen alleviate that? So what does he say? With Hoil. Because now Hoil downgrades it to an Isser D'Rabbanan. Tosfos here just says the opposite. He says, realize that since Hoil only works until like 5 minutes before the end of Yom Tov, you could theoretically be liable for an Isser Deoraisa even according to Rabbah when Hoil no longer applies. Now, if that's the case, how does this chapa nafkamina lehalacha? Halacha. So, it should be very clear now. If the whole institution of Eruv Tavshillen is designed to allow me to cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos, but only when there's only an Isser D'Rabbanan, then on a practical basis, even today, I have to stop cooking, or I have to make sure the food is cooked and ready in time before Shabbos comes in, such that theoretically guests could knock on my door and sit down for a meal. But if I am still cooking the food, and to the extent of how much it has to be cooked is discussed by the poskim, but we're just discussing the concepts now. If I'm still cooking that food 5 minutes before it's lichbenching for Shabbos, then Eruv Tavshillen has not helped me, because it can only alleviate an Isser D'Rabbanan, not an Isser D'Oraisa, and therefore I would be doing a malacha on Yom Tov. I'm violating Yom Tov D'Oraisa, and I would get malchus for it. So let's bear that in mind. According to this mahalach, the mechanism of Eruv Tavshillen is limited. And as we'll see in a moment, the Mishnah Berurah says that the minhag in many communities is therefore, when Yom Tov falls out on a Friday, they always accept Shabbos a little bit early to dafka avoid this problem. Because when the husband says, honey, I'm going to shul, she knows it's time for lichbenching. She knows that, okay, Shabbos is coming, that's it. She'll put away the pots, she'll stop the cooking, and everything will stop. And that way we'll avoid the problem of someone violating Yom Tov D'Oraisa by cooking from Yom Tov to Shabbos. Okay? Now are you still with me? Are you still with me? Okay? A little bit further. Now let's take a look at Tosfos in Maseches Eruvin. Okay, Mishum Hachana. Isser Hachana, it's not relevant right now, the context of the whole Gemara in Eruvin, but let's take a look at what the Tosfos says. Isser Hachana de Oraisahu, Kidi Yalfina lekaman bishmaitin. There's an Isser of Hachana, which means that you can only prepare on Chol for Yontif or on Chol for Shabbos, but you may not prepare on Yontif for Shabbos or on Yontif for Chol. And that's an Isser de Oraisa. Kirialafina lekamon, because Tosfos says we paskin like Rabbah. Umasha ofin the Yontif l'Shabbos mishum Eruv Tavshillen mefarish Rabbah beperik elu ovrin mishum hol mikloy leorchin. And so how do you get around that just by using a rabbinic device? As we just said, using the principle of Hoil. Okay? Now, v'im tomar. But let me ask you a question, Tosfos says. V'hechi boy be'ilu ovrin l'meimar de Rebbe Eliezer les lehoil. Im kain l'didei eich ofen miyom tov l'shabbos ha'isle iser hachana ha'chabishmaitin. There's the Tana Rebbe Eliezer is going to be in trouble. Because according to Rebbe Eliezer, he doesn't hold of Hoel. The Gemara is suggesting that he doesn't hold of Hoel, but he still holds of Rabbah's principle that there's an Isser Hachana Mid'oraisa. How can that work then? How can a Rebbe Eliezer hold of an Eruv Tavshillen? If you don't hold of Hoel, and you do hold that there's an Isser D'Oraisa of Hachana, then how does an Eruv Tavshillen help? Woo! So this is a big problem. Tosfos is going to have to come up with a different solution. You can't use the solution that we had before, that if you hold of Isser Hachana D'Oraisa, you hold of Hoel. I just found someone in the Gemara who holds that Isser Hachana is Deoraisa but doesn't hold of Hoil. So how does an Eruv Tavshillen work? Listen to this answer. So Tosafos gives one answer, and now he gives a second answer from the Ritzba, also another Tosafist. The Ritzba Omer, Delo Shayach Hachana Be'afia Ubishel De'ein Ze Elatikun Ba'alma Shemitaken HaMa'achal Velo Shayach Hachana Ela Li'inyan Beitza Ve'eruv Shehu Davar Chadash. What you were alluding to, Laser said, well, who's to say that cooking is Hachana, right? You're absolutely right, according to the Ritzba. The Ritzba now introduces us to a new concept. The two are not the same. There's an Isser of Hachana to prepare on Chol for Shabbos. On Yontif l'Shabbos, I should say. Or from Yontif to Chol. But that Isser is only to create something new. If something new comes into existence on Yontif, then it cannot be used on Shabbos. Like a Beitza Shenolda B'Yontiv is Asur B'Shabbos, because it didn't have the proper Hachana. But Hachana means that it can't be newly created. But if I have flour and water that I had already before Yontiv, and I just mix them together and bake it in an oven, that's not under the rubric anymore of Isser Hachana. That is taking something that pre-existed and altering its form, and that's no longer in violation of the Isser Hachana. I may be in violation of other things, like doing malacha on Yontif for Shabbos, but I'm certainly not in violation of the Isser Hachana. What did I do? Did I do a malacha? So it's a machlokes. I either did a malacha because you're not allowed to cook on Yontif for any day other than Yontif itself, like we saw, like Rava had said, and therefore you have to rely on the principle of Hoil, right? And therefore Eruv Tavshillen works. Or you say like Rav Ashi, that no, there's bichlal no Isser at all of preparing. Did I get my Amoraim mixed up? I don't remember. Or the that there's bichlal. There's bichlal, or maybe that was Rav Chisda, that there's bichlal no Isser of preparing from Yom Tov to Shabbos. The Isser is only from preparing to cook from Yom Tov to Chol, but not cooking from Yom Tov to Shabbos. Bottom line is, we now have a whole revolutionary take on the reason why we've obviated the Isser Hachana. So you can hold like Rabbah, who says the Isser Hachana is Deoraisa. You don't have to hold of Hoil, but you could still hold that an Eruv Tavshillen works, because the Isser of cooking or baking on Yontif is not a violation of the Isser Hachana. It's only a violation of cooking and baking on Yontif when it's not for Yontif, which is only an Isser D'Rabbanan.
You wouldn't be limited by time anymore?
And therefore you're not limited by time anymore, Laser. Precisely. Therefore, according to this Shita and Tosfos, you wouldn't have to worry that I'm doing an Isser the last 5 minutes of Yom Tov going into Shabbos, because it doesn't matter. It's not an Isser Hachana. Good.
So that's what I asked.
Okay.
That's what I asked.
What? Okay. Should we take some questions now?
So, could you give an example of something that doesn't exist? What doesn't exist?
An egg. An egg. A freshly laid egg. Freshly laid egg did not exist before Yom Tov, and now it exists, right? And that's a newly existent item, and therefore, if it gets laid on Yom Tov, I may not eat it on Yom Tov, nor eat it on the following day on Shabbos, because it did not have proper preparation by coming into the world on a weekday. Another example would be what Tosfos uses, the example of Eruv. Let's say I want to make an Eruv Techumin, and I want to be able to walk beyond the Tchum on Shabbos. So by just even though the food pre-exists, but it did not exist in that place on Chol, so therefore putting it down on Yontif is not the valid establishment of an Eruv, because it's newly placed in that place. And it's the placement which is the newness, which renders it invalid.
So what does that do with the whole concept of Eruv, taking an egg and a piece of challah or whatever? Why do I have to do that?
Why do you have to do it?
Yeah.
We've explained this already.
No, but it's already in existence. It's
So,
in existence.
According to the Ritzvah, the reason for making an Eruv Tavshillen is not to obviate the problem of Hachana. There's no Isser of Hachana.
So what
It's
is
to obviate the Isser of cooking and baking on Yontif when it's not for Yontif, which is either an Isser D'Oraisa or an Isser D'Rabbanan, right? That was the Machlokas Rav Chisda and Rava, right? Is it an Isser D'Oraisa or an Isser D'Rabbanan, right? That's a separate Isser of cooking and baking on Yontif. The Torah only permits Meleches Ochel Nefesh on Yontif itself, for Yontif. But if I cook on Yontif for a day other than Yontif, so that's an Isser D'Oraisa, or at least an Isser D'Rabbanan if I'm doing it for Shabbos.
It can only be D'Rabbanan.
Well, it's either D'Rabbanan because it's from Yontif to Shabbos, in which case one Mandorma says that's only D'Rabbanan,
Right.
or it's because of Hoil that it's only a D'Rabbanan. Hol the Kloi Orchid,
Right.
as the Gemara Psachim would say. Yes.
But don't we rely on Eruv Tavshillen for all types of hachana, not just for bishul? Like the nusach of the Eruv Tavshillen is kol tzarchana miyom tavo l'shavachem.
Well, that's a good question. What does Kol Tzarchana mean?
Like
It would mean anything that we need that requires malacha, is what essentially we're saying. Anything that requires malacha, but something that, according to what we're saying now, an Eruv Tavshillen will not remedy anything that would newly come into existence on Yontif. It's not making an Eruv Tavshillen is not going to help a Beitza Shenolda B'Yom.
But to light a candle for Shabbos, to
Yeah.
set up.
All of that is only the malachos, but it's the candle was pre-existent. Candle was existent. There's something that was in existence before, and therefore just transferring a flame, a pre-existent flame, is perfectly fine. Anything that was pre-existent is what the Eruv Tavshillen permits according to the Ritzvah. Okay, now, this provides us with a lot of stuff, okay? I recommend that you go through the Drisha, which we're not going to have time to go through tonight, but he basically speaks out everything that we've come out with. Yom Tov, the Shulchan Aruch paskins in source number 10. Yom Tov shechalios be'erev Shabbos lo yavashel batchila litzarach Shabbos. Oh, by the way, the Drisha basically just wants to point out that there's a machlokus on how to learn the Rambam. That's the point. That's why I copied the Drisha for you. The Drisha says it's a machlokus on how to learn the Rambam. As we said before, the simple understanding of the Rambam. Why does the Rambam say that it's only an Isser D'Rabbanan to cook and to bake from Yom Tov to Shabbos? Is because Pashtus is because he holds like Rav Ashi that it's only Asr Mid'Oraisa when you cook and bake on Yom Tov for Chol, but not on Yom Tov for Shabbos. And that's why an Eruv Tavshillen works. And so therefore it sounds like that Rambam can't hold like Rabbah, that the is an Isser Hachana for Yom Tov to Shabbos is an Isser Hachana D'Oraisa. Sounds like the Rambam doesn't hold that way. And Taka, that's the way the Beis Yosef learns. If you take a look at source number 3, take a look at the Hagos Maimonides. Kasfu hatoisus v'chol raboseinu mitzorfas, dehachana l'rabba asura min haTorah afilu miyom tov l'Shabbos. The Tosafists and all of the French rabbis say that Rabba's hachana is an Isser D'Oraisa, even when you're preparing on Yom Tov for Shabbos. Kagon she'ein bo hana b'Yom Tov kagon samach l'chashecha deleka l'meimar hol mikloy le'archi chazilei. He says an example would be if I'm cooking 5 minutes before Shabbos comes in at the end of Yom Tov, and there's no principle of hol. That's a D'Oraisa. Or le'inyan kinyan shvisa shehu tzarech machar. Or if I'm creating an Eruv Tchumen, putting down the food parcel on Yom Tov, that's something new that is totally not for the benefit of Yom Tov at all, where the principle of Hoil will not apply, and therefore, says the Hagos Maimoni, this is an Isser D'Oraisa to do this. Va'afilu hachi mo Eruv Tavshillen Rabbi, the Rava l'tami dislei hol beperek elo ovim karebi Eliezer damer hol mikloy le'archin chazilei. So, and nonetheless, Eruv Tavshillen works, even though it's not like the Rambam, because since you use the principle of Hoel. It's clear from the Hagos Maimoni that he learns, and the Beis Yosef learns this way as well, that it's a machlokus between Tosfos and the Rambam, whether the Isser of cooking on Yom Tov for Shabbos is an Isser D'Oraisa, or is it only an Isser D'Rabbanan. That's clear. However, there are others who learn the Rambam differently, and that's really, you have to take a look at the Bir Halacha in detail, who brings a series of Achronim, who learn, they ask a fundamental question. Elsewhere in Mishnah Torah, the Rambam says that the Yisr Hachana is Deoraisa, paskins like Rabbah, when it comes to a Beitza. So the question therefore becomes, how do you reconcile it's a Shtir in Rambam, it's a Shvera Rambam? Rambam is contradicting himself. So, so the Bir Halacha says that the Rambam is not saying that it's Midurabanan because he doesn't hold like Rabbah. He's saying that it's Midurabanan because he says, like the Ritzvah, that there's a fundamental difference between Hachana and Bishul and Afiyah. Hachana is with something that's newly existent, and there the Rambam agrees that there's an Isser Hachana Midioraisa. But here the Rambam is talking about the Isser of Bishul and Afiyah, of cooking and baking, which is only an Isser Midurabanan, even if you hold like Rabbah. And therefore, in the final analysis, if we want to get to Psak Halach, and this is what we'll finish with for tonight, the Mishnah Brura paskins at the end of the, go to page 4, the Mishnah Brura paskins in source number 11, he says, V'kasvu ha'achronim, if you go to the 5th line in Sifkat and Gimel, he says, V'kasvu ha'achronim, de biyom tov shechalios be'erev Shabbos, yizaher lahakdim hachanat ma'achalav l'shabbat b'chdei sheyigmor melachto ba'od yom gadol. The Achronim write that you have to be careful. He says, when you're relying on an Eruv Tavshillen, you're cooking on Friday for Yom Tov, make sure that you finish all of your cooking and preparation while it's still plenty of time in the day. He says, because if you wait up until the very end of Yom Tov, as going into Shabbos, there's a chashash of a malacha deoraisa because we don't apply the principle of hoil. He says, and Hatman is too, he says, the kasvu demitam ze noagu lahaktim tfilas arvis belil Shabbos keshechal samach liyom tov kidei shelo yisacher meleches bishula biyom tov ad samach lechashecha. And they write that the reason is, and based on this issue, many communities have a minhag to bring in Shabbos early when Yom Tov is on a Friday, to that women will realize that they have to stop cooking early, and that's the reason. But he says, "Va'ayin bir halacha de bishas hadachak yesh lahakel biyom tov sheni shechal be'erev Shabbos im nisacher bishulu l'Shabbos ad samach l'Shabbos de'af biyom tov rishon after the yesh lahakel bishas hadachak u'lechatchila bevadei tzarach lizar b'zeh u'vifrat biyom tov rishon shehu de'oraisa." And he says, take a look at the bir halacha, because in the bir halacha I clarify that if you hold like the Ritzvah, the time limit does not apply. Because the Ritzvah, remember, says cooking and baking is not an Isser of Hachana. And therefore you don't need the principle of Hoil. Right? So based on that, even if you hold that there's an Isser Hachana de Oraisa, but you could still hold that there's no Isser de Oraisa of cooking and baking on Yom Tov for Shabbos, even without the principle of Hoil, because you might hold like Rav Chisda, who says that really midioraisa, there's no Isser of deoraisa of cooking on Yom Tov for Shabbos. And maybe that's taka what the Rambam means. And based on that, you can bishas hadechak, if you realize, oh my gosh, it's 5 minutes before lich benching and I haven't cooked anything for Shabbos, you can rely on it bishas hadechak in a dire situation, but lichatchila you should not rely on it. Certainly not if it's the first day Yom Tov going into Shabbos, because there's a real chashash of being over on a deoraisa, according to all the Rishonim who don't hold like the Ritzvah. So bottom line is, we got a lot of cholent here, a lot of mixtures, okay? So let's just review now our machlokas, and then we'll be done. The reason for Eruv Tavshillen Rabbi says because of Kavod Shabbos. Rav Ashi says because of Kavod Yom Tov. The principle of Hoel Rav Chisda says it's not a thing. And therefore, the whole issue of why I'm allowed to cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos is because it's not a deoraisa. And Rabbah says it is a thing. The Isser of cooking and baking from Yom Tov to Shabbos, the Rambam says it's an Isser derabanan, and Tosfos says it's an Isser deoraisa when there's no Hoel, because he holds that there's no difference between Hachana, the Isser of Hachana, and the Isser of Bishul and Afiyah. That's Tosfos. What is included in the Isser of Hafachana from Yom Tov to Shabbos? Most Rishonim say any malacha, including cooking. And that's the simple way that the Hagos Maimoni understands the Rambam, that he's cholek with the Bali Tosfos. But the Ritzpan and the Meiri say only the creation of something new. And finally, why does the Rambam hold that cooking from Yom Tov l'Shabbos is only Yasser Mid'Rabbanan? The Beis Yosef says because he holds that the Isser Hachana is only Mid'Rabbanan. And because you're cooking and baking and you're not actually doing Hachana. And rather, because he holds that the Isser Halacha is only Mid'Rabbanan, meaning, says the Beis Yosef, because the Rambam paskins like Rav Ashi or Rav Chisda, who hold that cooking on Yom Tov for Shabbos is only Nisr D'Rabbanan. But the Drisha says, because he holds like the Ritzpah, that cooking is not a problem of Hachana. Okay. Woo! This is confusing stuff.
Can I ask you one question?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you're cooking if you forgot to make an Eruv,
Yeah.
can you rely on oil?
No, you cannot, because you still have the Yisur D'Rabbanan. So what do you do? A person forgot to make an Eruv Tavshillen. So this is Mefurash in Shulchan Aruch. If you forgot to make an Eruv Tavshillen, speak to the Rav.
Say, if you hold if you could hold of a oil, you said you can't. If you could just have oil.
If you just have hoil,
Yeah.
hol v'kloy orchim
Right.
does not give you a heter lechatchila to cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos when you know you're cooking on Yom Tov for Shabbos.
It gives you a heter to cook on Yom Tov.
It gives you a heter to cook on Yom Tov for Yom Tov,
Yeah, right.
which you naturally have even without hoil. The point of hoil is that it downgrades an Isser D'Oraisa down to an Isser D'Rabbanan. That's what hoil does. Okay? Hoel takes away the D'Oraisa Isser of cooking on Yom Tov for Shabbos if you hold like Rabbah, right, and makes it only an Isser D'Rabbanan. So, but it's still an Isser D'Rabbanan, and therefore you can't rely on Hoel if you didn't make an Eruv Tavshillen. Eruv Tavshillen is the mechanism that alleviates the D'Rabbanan.
If you forgot, then you're fully stopped.
Now, if a person forgot to make an Eruv Tavshillen, you get one free pass. You get one free pass for the year. And that is, you can rely, when the Rav of the Shtat makes his Eruv Tavshillen, he says, Lana ulachol hadorim ba'ir hazas. He says, this Eruv is going to work for me and for all of my chevra.
Everyone says that.
Unless it wasn't an
I
accident.
know, everyone says it, but it doesn't work.
Unless it wasn't an accident. Unless you knew.
Unless you were a posheya,
Yeah.
right. But if you asked if you forgot.
Yeah.
But what if you forgot a second time? Sorry. You're in trouble.
No friends. No friends over.
That's right.
What about the eitzah that you can?
No, there is an eitzah.
You can bring over your
You can bring all of your food that needs to be cooked over to a neighbor, be makna it to your neighbor, and then the neighbor will have to cook it for you because it belongs to him now.
That's your raw stuff. You didn't.
Your raw stuff, yeah. That's the other eitzah that's brought down.
You can also make it tonight.
What kind of tonight?
If today's Yom Tov or today's.
That's only if it's Yom Tov Sheni. So Yom Tov Sheni, there are other heterim.
Right.
But Yom Tov
What do you do
Rishon,
if you forget?
but Yom Tov Rishon, we don't give such a heter. Let's say Yom Tov Rishon is Friday. So there, we know that the Oraisa, it's Yom Tov. You can't make such a tonight.
For the community chores, which was allowed to do it.
Okay. Why two? Because one is for Afiyah and one is for Bishul.